Welcome to Around the Shop with 360 Woodworking. Your hosts are Chuck Bender and Glen Huey. Each Saturday, tune in for the best in woodworking tips, techniques, and general shop fun. Now, here's the 360 guys, Chuck and Glen.
Today's topic is backboards. So, the big question is, do you run them horizontal, vertical, or both?
Depends.
Man, that commitment you have, Chuck, is just got me worried. I'll tell you.
Well, you know as well as I do that it depends on whether you are making something where the backboards are visible or not. If they're visible, they tend to run vertically. If they're not visible, they tend to run horizontally.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
So the surprising then would be the both, but we'll get there.
Right.
Okay, so my take on this was horizontal boards because for the most part, two reasons I look at it. Number one is that's usually, and I say usually, the shortest distance. So if you're stretching a board from side to side, it tends to be less length. So you have an option to use maybe cutoffs, things like that. And the other thing
depending
is,
on the piece of furniture.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah, right. And the other part of it is that was, in essence, what was holding the case together at the back. At the front, you have drawer dividers. It could be dovetailed in some way.
Frames.
Face frames, the same thing.
All kinds of things.
In the back, you generally don't have anything other than at the bottom corner, top corner, if your box, if you will, is dovetailed, then you have a dovetail joint holding them together.
Sure.
But you don't have anything in the center of that, keeping that
from
side
the sides from spreading out. Right.
And that's the reason that I generally would go horizontal on most everything.
Right.
So,
and I think that's probably the reason that most period pieces went horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
When you really think about it, they understood expansion and contraction.
Right.
They just didn't have to deal with it as much as we do because they didn't have central heating and air conditioning.
Right.
So to run on a low chest that's 38 inches wide and 36 inches high, to run the boards vertical meant you were going to get all your expansion and contraction to the left and right on a case that's already, that's the weakest spot of that whole thing. You're actually going to take, in the summertime, you're going to just spread the chest apart.
Right.
So
yeah, and let's go then to your second thing where you said where the back's going to be visible. So you're talking mainly like secretary top, bookcase, something along those
corner
lines.
cabinets and step back or Dutch cupboards, the kinds of things where you would see them. It's got to give it that verticality. You know, you run they're run up there, and they're a lot of times they're beaded, and you know the idea is it makes things look narrow and tall.
Right, and that works well with those kind of pieces because generally those pieces different from chest of drawers. We didn't have the drawer frames, the boxes and stuff put in there on period work, so there was really nothing on those cases to nail to if you ran vertically. You could hit the top and the bottom. But when you move into the other pieces we're talking about, then at that point you have some type of shelf. Corner cupboard has shelves, bookcase, secretary, all those have shelves. So then it becomes pretty easy to run those boards vertical.
Sure.
And the decoration on the inside. Okay. Interesting.
You mean bead or no bead?
Bead or no bead, yeah, we could do that.
Well, see, I was going to go right towards, okay, we've sort of established that most case pieces are going to run horizontal. I have run them vertical because you know, I've done double chests, which were not a real period design, but people look at a single chest that's, like I said, about 36, 38, 40 inches wide and go, that's just not enough space for all the clothing we have in the modern society. So can't you just make two of those stuck together?
Yeah, we've all done that. In fact, there is some historical stuff. Shakers did a double chest that I've actually built for customers, and it's along those same way. I mean, all of a sudden you're running a piece, you know, across the back that's 59, 60, 62 inches, and it's like, well, that's a lot of handle to work on, and it's a lot of, you know, just holding it over on the two edges.
Right. And you know, where that really comes in, you know, you're looking at it, you get out there 6.5 feet, now all of a sudden you have enough flex in those boards that who knows if it's really going to provide any additional support to the chest.
Well, that brings a nice idea, our nice next move in this topic. When you do those, are they half flap joints? Are they tongue and groove? Do you just butt the ends? How are the edges? What do you do?
Well, primarily I do half lap joints. I've done a couple of pieces with tongue and groove, but for the most part, it's half laps.
Yeah.
Hardly ever done butt joints on backs.
Well, the idea with the back to me is to try to keep the dust out of the interior. And if you're just putting butts on there and then the boards shrink a little bit, you got a gap. That doesn't work.
Exactly.
Right.
The tongue and groove thing, since I make most of my backboards around a half an inch thick, you're not going to get much hold out of it.
No.
The places where I have done tongue and grooves, occasionally I've done them on corner cabinets and things like that where, by just the nature of all the extra resistance on a tongue and groove, it gives more support to the cabinet.
So you were doing those out of half-inch thick material too?
Sometimes I boost them up, but not a lot.
That's where, generally for me, if I'm putting backboards in a case, I'm going to rabbet out the back of the case 3/4. I'm going to use a 5/8 inch board.
Right.
So a tongue and groove in 5/8, perfectly doable. I probably do 3/16 tongue and groove instead of 1/4 inch, but I'm cutting them at the table saw, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Right.
When you start looking at those tall pieces, and generally when I say tall, I'm thinking the corner cupboard. In my head, I'm automatically seeing a one piece, but you really want to do those in two pieces.
Yeah, I was going to say very seldom that I ever make those in one piece.
Yeah,
they're a bear to move at 6.5 feet tall.
Absolutely. I did one plan that was copied off an Ohio piece that was a single like that, and I swore I'd never do it again, and I don't think that I have ever done it again. It's way too much to move around.
Yeah, they're hard enough to move in two pieces, really.
Yeah. But even on the two piece, you've got an upper section that's a little bit longer, taller, if you will, in the lower section. But, I run the boards vertical on both sections.
Me too.
Okay. And again, for me, that's because those shelves are in there, and they're easy to nail to, and it really adds the rigidity and all that.
Sure.
Right.
Well, once you lock a backboard into 3 spots, 3 nails, you got yourself a triangle of brace. It's it sort of squares the case up. And
All right, so you mentioned it. Let's talk about it. How do you attach the backboards for the most part? And let's work with this premise. Let's work with the idea that we're doing a 4-drawer chest. So we're going to run the boards horizontal.
Yep.
And how do we go from there? How do you attach them?
I attach them pretty much.
Nails, screws, or wriggly gum?
Never screws.
Never screws? Always? Oh, okay. So we're down to wriggly gum that's been chewed, or...
Well, the unchewed stuff doesn't hold
No,
as
it's
well.
not near as sticky.
I usually use hand-wrought nails.
Hand-wrought nails. Can't we just go with nails? You nail it.
Well, I don't take out an 18 gauge nailer and shoot it in there either.
No, I hope not. Especially through half-inch backboards.
I'm either using reproduction or actual period nails.
Right.
And I'm doing them pretty much the way that I've seen them on antiques, which is depending on how wide the board is.
I knew you were going to qualify yourself here because I was coming right back with it because I've seen your backboard.
2, 3, 4 nails in each end of each board, depending. Because I have used
3, 4 nails in the end of each board.
Well, you use a 20-inch wide poplar backboard. It needs 4 nails.
Okay, so let me start again. We're going to be drilled in a 4-drawer chest using normal lumber that we can get our hands on. Why no screws ever? Now, I say this because I tend to agree with you, but I have put backs on with screws, like on a spice box or something small that I wanted to just pop it off and take it, that kind of deal. But generally, I'm right with you. I just want to know your
because of
reason.
expansion and contraction, screws lock things in fast.
Right.
And I don't mean speed. I mean they lock it in. They fix it permanently.
Right.
As opposed to a nail.
Right, and the idea is that the
They have
screws
some
hold
movement.
tight and the nails give back and forth. And this is why, we go into museums and we look at pieces of furniture that have crown moldings on them for 250 years. And it's not that the case sides don't expand and contract versus the cross grain of the moldings. It has to do with the fact that it's nailed and the nails give. And that's why we use them.
Yep.
So we're going to nail on the back.
I'm going to nail on the back.
So a 10-inch, 12-inch, 20-inch wide board on the
A
back.
20-inch board needs 4 nails at a minimum.
Well, tell me what happens then as that board expands and contracts. it's going to split?
Sure.
Okay. And you're okay with that, comfortable with that, because that mimics what period pieces
Sure.
did. Okay. So if you want to get away from that,
And you're going to use a whole bunch of 6-inch stock?
not
or-
necessarily 6. I mean, for the most part, I grab whatever's on my shelf and I just pull it off the top and I cut, whether it's
So
8,
4 to
10,
8.
12.
Right.
I don't think I've ever gotten above a 10, maybe occasionally,
Right.
but
But how narrow would you go? I mean, if
oh,
you've
I
gone
wouldn't go
to-
down below 6 at all.
Okay.
I seldom buy lumber that's less than 6 inches. Occasionally, I'll pick up a really gnarly looking piece that's 4 because
Man,
I got a place to
on
use
corner cabinets, we would, that's where when we would order, 1,000 feet of poplar or whatever, and we skim all the wide stuff out of it, and you have a whole bunch of 4 and 5-inch boards,
Yeah.
backboards for corner cabinets,
Yeah,
because the more of those you get in there, and the more rigid you can keep the piece. But going back to the chest,
Yeah.
if I was going to use 6-inch, I would probably drive 2 in on each end at a minimum. Probably
So-
not any more than that.
Yeah, I think the way I would talk about how I put my backboards on is I take the first board and put it up there. It gets 2 nails in it, one on either end.
Okay.
Then I put the second board up with if you want to take the half lap, lapped over onto the outside, about an inch below that,
Drive
the
another.
half lap, I drive 2 more nails, one on either end.
Right, because that's going to hold the upper board in place.
It pinches that top piece.
Got
right.
it.
Okay. And I work that way all the way down to the bottom. And my last board is the only board on any case that I've done that has more than 2 nails in it.
You modern furniture guys building stuff to allow for expansion and contraction. You
and-
drive me crazy.
And that's exactly what it does. I know
Me,
those
I'm sitting there
boards-
hoping that 20-inch board cracks halfway across.
Well, that's a difference in the approaches.
Sure.
That also explains why you had customers long after I didn't. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, and I'm looking at that for the idea of expansion and contraction. With only the 2 nails holding that board's just going to move and float and expand
Sure.
and contract. It's never going to crack. It's never going to peel back. Now, there are occasions where I would have a wider board, say, a 10-inch board or so, that I look at because I know that if you're pinching just the top and you're nailing at the bottom, that 8 inches or so that's in there, that's enough that it could bow away. And at that point, I'm going to study my board a little bit.
I was going to say, particularly if you're using poplar, because it does have a tendency
Right.
to cup, and it has a twist,
Right.
and it does it with vigor.
Right, that's true. At that point, I'm looking at the grain at
Right.
the end on that, and I'm going to put that grain in, or the outside of the tree facing inside, because at that point, I'm pinching those 2 downsides, and the
Right.
natural ability or natural cup would be
Away from...
it would be into where the rabbit's holding it in.
Right.
So those are things that I look for as I'm doing that. But generally, I don't get to that because I'm not using those wider pieces. All right. So now we're going to progress on because you mentioned more boards on your corner cupboards the better, and we know that vertical boards are the places that you're going to see are the places that you talk bead.
Right.
So let's talk bead. Bead, no bead. I know some you do, some you don't. I mean, that's just yeah.
Well, even some of the horizontal boards I've beaded, and I've done that a fair amount, just simply because I've seen it on some period pieces. A lot of things not.
Bead out, bead in.
Yeah, because you're gonna.
No, which one?
Yes,
Really? On both. So you're actually beating the outside face and the
inside face.
Huh.
You run the rabbits for the shiplaps on opposite faces of the board, so you've got one inside and one outside
Right.
rabbit.
Sure.
So when you bead it, you bead inside face and outside face at the upper part of that rabbit, and then when you stack them all together, you've only got, looking at it from outside, there's one bead per joint. Looking at it inside, you have the same thing.
Right.
It wasn't common on period pieces to be
Yeah.
done that way, but I have seen some.
I think I ever have. It's interesting. Of course,
And-
I haven't looked at the number of pieces that you have either.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not. It sort of reminds me. I had a piece come into the shop decades ago at this point, and the drawer was all put together normally, half lines in the front, through dovetails in the back, and it had this tiny little raised bead around the outside edge of the drawer. Somebody took the drawer sides and ran a bead on there, and then they rabbit it away. The bead comes around, and then they rabbit it away to it, and they put that around there. And I thought, that's a really cool, unique kind of a thing. So we don't necessarily, as people who are doing reproductions or copying period pieces, necessarily copy everything exactly. Sometimes we take those quirky little things and incorporate those into what we do. And like I said, I've seen a handful of pieces where they beaded the backboards on pieces that were never going to be seen. So I tend to do that. I'd say probably at least 50% of the time.
No good.
A lot of times it's just a shiplap and it goes in because that's what they tended to do. You weren't putting the extra work into something that just wasn't seen.
See, that begs me to think is, did they have beaded boards left over from something they just used on the back, or did they actually sit down and take the time to put the extra energy into beading the backboards?
Well, now you're coming into something else. When I had a whole bunch of guys and we were just cranking furniture out like mad, we would set up and mill and bead, shiplap and bead a stack full of poplar.
Right.
And then when you were building a piece, just go grab some boards, cut them up, and use them.
Yeah.
So
Was it the same thing?
semi-production. So either you make some up that are shiplapped without beads and some with, or you just set up, do the whole thing, and now that's what you use. So we did a lot of cupboards and a lot of things like that where they ran vertically, and you would put the beads on there because they're going to be seen. The bead helps hide the expansion and contraction gaps.
Exactly.
And why wouldn't you just? I mean, that's a perfect spot. The cabinets behind us. I mean, if you would put beaded boards in there, open it up. Now not only does it accentuate the verticality of the piece, but it also dresses up that joint that's going to open and close seasonally.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. The thing I guess we should talk about with the beads, and I think you mentioned it quickly, but I think we need to make sure everybody knows this, is where the bead goes when you bead a backboard. And I actually had a number of people ask this question to me and posted a blog on it years ago, which is on our website at 360woodworking.com. So you can dig that out and check it out. I wouldn't do it right now. It's not that fascinating. But the idea is, again, where do you place that bead? And if you're working with 1/2 inch or even working with 5/8 and you put a half lap on 5/8, I have a 5/16 inch tongue at that point, or lap over. So if you bead that with a 1/4 inch bead and you're going in 1/8 of an inch, you're reducing that to almost drop it on the floor, she snaps in half. So there is a way that you need to
you beat it at the full thickness at the top of the rabbet, not at the end of the tongue. It's not on the very edge of the board, it's up at the top.
There you go. Right. And do you set up when you go to cut your half laps, do you set them at a specific thickness, width, cut, something like that? I have this thing. One of the ways that I woodwork is I try to do the exact same thing each time.
Right.
And what it does is it takes the thought processes out for me. So I know it's like, okay, if I'm doing these backboards, this is what I do.
Yeah, I normally set up with a 1/2 inch backboard. I obviously set the depth of the cut on the thing to a 1/4 inch, so it's halfway.
Sure.
And the other way I go about a 1/2 inch.
Do you?
Because that way, no matter what kind of expansion or contraction you get, and it's primarily the contraction that we're worried about because long term, expansion is a short term view of wood. Contraction is the long-term view. Okay, 100 years from now, that board's going to be smaller than it is today. I don't care how humid it gets between now and then.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's going to continue to dry and continue to dry and continue to contract
and continue to shrink.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure if I'm using a 1/2 inch lap, I'm never going to get to the point where it's shrunk up enough that I have a huge gap in between.
So we're pretty close. I automatically set my fence at a 1/4. Which then with the full kerf blade gives me 3/8. So
that's fine.
Really close.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now we talked about beads as surface treatments, and that leads us to how do you handle the rest of the surface?
Yeah. Well, for me this is pretty easy because not being that super into hand tool, need to get it done a little faster type mentality. My boards come out of a wide belt sander, or they come out of my thickness planer, and I hit them with a DA or a random orbit sander, and I'm done. I don't do any other work to them, which I don't think is probably what you do.
No, it isn't. Again, I'm trying to mimic what was done with the hand tools, so I'm either running over the face of the show face with a cabinet scraper, like a Stanley number 80. That's the two-handled thing, not the little card. Card scrapers are useless for trying to do poplar. If you want to get a board really fuzzy, use a card scraper. If the boards are, if it's really straight grain, nice air dried poplar, I will more than likely grab my scrub plane and scrub plane the face and leave it at that.
Yeah.
Now, I do join it and plane it through power tools first.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is removing the machine marks with the hand planes.
So that begs the question of, I've seen backboards that look like they were pits on and rough.
Yep. You will see that. Because,
Why
again,
then do you take your scrub plane to them and clean them all off?
well, except that I don't, well, because we don't have anything that's pits on. The closest we can get really today, unless you are
Well, you could take pieces
working
off
at Colonial Williamsburg where they're actually pit sawing this
You
stuff.
could take stuff off of a bandsaw mill. You're going to get similar cuts to
Right.
it.
And I have left some of that stuff in there. Those are fine. You know, if you've got a particularly twisted board and you're just milling, like I said, if you're milling 500 feet of backboards all at once,
sure,
you're bound to have a few machine, pits on, bandsaw marks or whatever left. But I don't worry so much about it. What I do when I scrub plane it, I try and just get rid of the joiner, the planer, and the table saw marks.
right,
That's it.
right, and that's essentially what I'm doing with the sander.
sanders.
I'm just cleaning them up, and getting rid of the marks. All right. So in summation, we know that we're going to run our backboards horizontal, vertical, or
Most
both.
of
Oh, we never talked about both.
Yeah, wait.
So both is one that I've done, both at the same time. Not just both once horizontal ones. And
I've seen this on period pieces, so I know
Sure,
exactly what
sure.
you're saying.
And what we're talking about, obviously, are tall case clocks, because running that backboard on a tall case clock, the full height on what might be 110 to 120 inches, that's a lot of board.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a lot of board to hand plane on a period piece.
it's
So
a lot of board to handle as far as putting it in there and getting the in. And also with that, we're still dealing with the expansion and contraction from side to side on the case. So what I have done on a couple cases, and it uses up some crap from the shop, I'll put them horizontal up to a certain point, and then I'll convert from there and run them vertical, because I need the backboard to stay in place, so as the hood slides on and off, it covers over the hood. So that's the place that you would do both.
Yep.
And when I did the area where the two met, I would use a tongue and groove at that. So I'm actually putting a groove into the end of the vertical piece and a tongue on the
end.
other. Yeah.
nice.
And slip them together. And it works fairly well. So
Cool.
it's a neat place to do it. So
Back to that summation.
backboard's going to run horizontal or vertical for the most part.
Occasionally both.
Occasionally both. We're looking at half laps and not tongue and groove so much because of the thinness of the boards in your case. I just look at that as a lot of extra work that if the
doesn't
piece
really gain you very
required,
much.
great. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't gain you much at all. Then how we're putting them in with the nails, I think our processes were quite different. You coming at it with a period perspective, me coming at it with taking into consideration the expansion and contraction of lumbers.
Both are valid.
Surface treatments, again, the aim for us both was to just get rid of mill marks and make sure we take off the modern tool marks, if you will.
Sure.
And beads, no beads, depends on where it's going to go. And the one thing
how
we
you feel about
definitely agree on is the bead has to go in the right spot.
That's right.
And that's something that they definitely have to do. So anything else you need to add?
I think that's it. We'll see you next week.
Join the 360 guys next week and every Saturday for more woodworking talk from around the shop.